Hey, we're back up. Alright, sweet. Um, so now, returning to where we were, some of the core concept behind the game is that there's this idea that when you read things, you interpret them differently to when you see them. You have the ability to use your imagination to fill in the blanks, and that can potentially lead to a greater sense of self-investment on behalf of the players, because they're creating in their minds some of the environment and the story and the context that everything takes place in. Um, and the other thing I wanted to do with this project was sort of pay homage to some of the text adventures and hypertext adventures and point and click adventures and stuff that I played um, in the past. Now, paying homage to something is it's not necessarily I'm always wary about talking about influences this early in a project, but I should probably highlight that to me, paying homage to something doesn't mean having a reference to something in there or a recreation of something that I happen to like. It's more about having been inspired by something and acting on that. So while there may be things that I am inspired by with this project that may not immediately be visible to players, the fact that whatever it is that's inspired me has moved me enough to go out and create something, that feels like it's a worthy way of honouring things. But there still will be some references to a couple bits and pieces. But yeah, so as I mentioned before, we've got this lovely head-mounted display thing, and because this ends up playing out as a first-person game, there's a really nice parallel between head tracking and looking around in a 3D space. So I feel like as far as having an intuitive interface goes, and being able to have a sense of presence that's not quite attainable without that sort of technology, as far as that sort of stuff goes, there's an opportunity to explore something interesting there. So that's another part of the concept that has slowly come together. So rather than just having text and stuff in the background, like inside the game itself, players don't get to see this, of course. There is actually 3D geometry. So there's shapes for stuff. If you're facing a tree, then there is a 3D model representing a tree that the game engine does what we call a raycast against, which is just a check to see if you can draw a line of sight from something to something else, or to draw a line from from an origin point to another point and see what it hits on the way. And so by raycasting against the 3D geometry, we can sort of do accurate mapping of the rotation of your head to work out what we're looking at. Also kind of using sound effects and music to support sorry, distractions. Using sound effects and music to support a sense of presence and a sense of place. It's amazing the difference that that having ambient environmental audio has. Whether it's birds chirping or crickets or a waterfall in the distance that gets louder as you move to a scene that's closer. It kind of really helps tie all the locations together and make them feel a lot more grounded and more real. There are inherent problems with regards to people becoming disoriented. We're very used to dealing with visual mediums. We're very used to dealing with visual reference cues and stuff when dealing with first-person games and first-person mouse look style controls and stuff. We rely a lot on seeing how much things move to work out how far away they are and to work out where our position in the scene is. And head tracking and head-mounted displays are they offer some fairly significant hurdles for people who aren't familiar with them as well. So to kind of offset that a little bit, I want to do as much as I can to make sure that the game itself isn't likely to let players feel disoriented or confused. That there's as much in the way as of hints and cues for orientation and for the type of interactions that players will be having as possible. early on, I kind of played with this idea of being able to walk around the scene. But since there's no visual reference to show you how far you've moved, or what you're moving towards, or what's passing you on the sides, it really came back to the game itself felt more readable and more believable. Someone's commenting on my lovely headset. It's got a sweet smiley face on the side there. Everything becomes a little bit more easier to comprehend and easier to keep track of if everything is always where it is. Like, if nothing happens until the player causes something to happen. So the player is sort of the only active agent in the game. And everything happens as a result of the actions that the player takes. So until you pull a lever, door won't open on its own. Or until you decide to pick up the sword, a dragon won't appear for you to fight, or something like that, It ends up, when there are moving elements, it's just so easy to lose track of where things are. And that might be something that's interesting to explore down the track, but I think for this first game that explores this kind of notion, that it's important to make sure that everything is as far away from being confusing as possible. So we've got in the UI concepts that I've been working on, the UI concepts that I was working on in the very, very beginning of the project's conception. It's always had a compass across the top, so that it shows your current bearing. When you're facing north, there's an N at the top. As you look to the left, you'll see the N move to the side, and you'll see north, west, and so on and so forth as you turn around. There's also going to be a vertical orientation indicator, which shows how far down, how far up you're looking. Haven't quite settled on a final implementation for that. Currently, I've just got a little arrow that's on the side of the screen that moves up and down, but that's not really a good match for the head-mounted display kind of thing, because everything needs to be fairly central. But then again, you've got that natural sense of orientation that you get from knowing that you are looking up or knowing that you are looking down, and that kind of one-to-one mapping between your head movements and what goes on in the game really makes a difference there as well. So something else that's a really big thing that I sort of mentioned a little bit earlier is positional audio. And at the moment, I'm really only exposing that, I'm only rendering stereo, which is left and right channels, but as you move your head, you hear things, pan across from the left to right ear or into both ears as you focus on it. And that seems to be enough to really kind of to really give players a sense of space. I've always been impressed by how much a scene seems to come alive when it's got the right kind of audio in there. And yeah, as I mentioned, we're kind of making sure that that by preventing the player from moving, we're making sure that each scene is more readable and a little bit less disorienting. So early on, I had a lot of ideas that I wanted to explore that didn't quite get in. I thought it'd be nice to touch on a couple of the prominent ones that I thought were going to work, but didn't. So the first one was like a crosshair. I want to have this crosshair in the middle of the screen that turned into an eye when you could interact with something or look at something. But it just kind of got in the way of the text presentation. There was no nice way to wrap the text around the crosshair in the center of the screen, and the amount of space that it required to take up just really couldn't justify the sort of things that I wanted to achieve with it. But I don't think that that's a huge loss. It was a nice idea, and I might come back to that with something else. But for the type of experience that I want to give, which is again trying to recreate some of the experience of text adventures, making sure that there's not too much in the way of non-textual elements on the screen at consistently on the screen. I think that kind of makes a bit of a difference as well. I want to have like a old style monospaced font, again to call back to really early text adventures, but it didn't really seem to gel, and it ended up feeling like there was a lot of wasted space on the screen. It didn't seem to aid readability as much as I was thinking. Um, but I've decided to switch over to Overlocker, I think it is, or Overlock. I can never remember, which is the font that I'm using here in the slideshow. Like I said, I played around with in-scene movement, but it was very, very difficult to keep a sense of orientation. We also prototyped a couple of ideas that involved having having the text positioned within the 3D world, so you walk up to something and you read the description, you walk up to something else, you read the description of that. But it really didn't convey the type of experience that I was after. And it felt like it was a lot more work for players to explore an environment as well. Whereas at the moment it's just rotate 360 degrees and look up and down by about 60 degrees, which I think I'm going to narrow down as time moves on. I also wanted to have like normal kind of game assets in the background with shaded geometry and proper lighting and stuff, because I thought that would be a nice way to kind of make everything feel a bit more real and a bit more readable. Like maybe this idea that as you look over stuff, you could kind of trace its contour and get a sense of shape. But really, that it didn't really work that way. It didn't really kind of give you the opportunity to feel what shape things were. It just made it hard to find stuff. So there's a signpost where it's got like a thin pole, and then it gets broader at the top where the sign is. And that it's like if you pan across it too low, you only got like the post, and it's just not big enough. So I found that large blocky shapes ended up being the best thing for discovery. And I also found that using flat colors rather than shaded stuff made it easier for the background tinting, which I think I'm going to mention in a bit, to work better. Because the idea is that when I get to it, I'll talk about it a bit more. But the idea is that the background is tinted based upon what you can see within the view frame, which gives you kind of a little bit of a hint of what might be nearby. So if you look up, things get brighter. If you look down, things get darker. That kind of stuff. And that can help you remember where things are as well. And yeah, so doing shaded geometry got in the way of that, which is a bit sad. So here's a look at some early UI sketches that I'd done. And as you can see, like the compass is quite prominent there. There was a point where I was toying. I didn't have cursor capture on here, but the middle one, the one in the middle row on the left, the idea there was like maybe I was going to have like a 3D compass that sits below the player, and as you look around, you can see different compass bearings. And the idea of having something that was like in-world and gave that 3D presence, it's still kind of neat. I like that. And I might prototype with it some more down the track, but it felt like it detracted from this notion of just everything exists in the HUD space, like in this kind of on the same layer thing, which means that you only need to focus on one thing, as opposed to with 3D geometry you focus differently on distant stuff, and that becomes an issue with stereoscopic things. Because one of the things I think that is nice about this concept is that these HMDs they end up being difficult for some people, causing eye strain problems over time. But if everything is at a consistent distance and everything has you get used to looking at one thing and you don't have to keep refocusing, I feel like that's going to make things a little bit less nausea-inducing and a little bit less a little bit less wearing to do over time. So the idea of having a VR game that is more accessible than VR games are in general, that's kind of cool. The other ones on the middle row kind of look at concepts for like loading bars and stuff, and loading icons, like a radial dial that fills up or something. Because I feel like having visual indicators when something has happened, because there are a lot of forced delays, which I'll get to and I'll talk about later. But when you have these forced delays, which mean, because otherwise everything's just flickering around the place. If you like scan past something really fast, it just flickers up and then goes away. But if you have a forced delay, then you've got to linger on it before you see it. But having some kind of loading thing appear helps remind the player that something is going on, and if they just sit and wait, something interesting will happen. And that's kind of cool. But yeah, so there's some scribbles from last year, probably, I don't know, I think that would have been September maybe, by which time the kind of, we'd sort of settled on the type of thing we were going to chase. So yeah, going back, I did some early prototyping in JMonkey Engine to explore different interpretations of the concept. So, like I said, some of them had the player moving around within the space, some of them had the text existing within the 3D space, and you move around and interact with it. And also we wanted to use this to kind of demonstrate that stuff will happen, or demonstrate what might work or what might not work. So being able to explore that in something like JMonkey Engine, where there's an existing API and everything's fairly quick and easy to put together, it felt like a really good option for kind of rapidly prototyping and checking out stuff. Eventually, though, we kind of decided that it was for the type of game that we were making here that the JMonkey Engine was a little bit heavier than was justified, and that the learning overhead of working with SDL and OpenGL, which I hadn't done before, seemed small enough for this fairly simple style of game that it was okay to just kind of jump out and make something more or less from scratch. So we tried to identify the core systems that we wanted earlier, the core functionality, and how they would translate into your features and elements within the game engine. And when we came time to put things together and actually have start to put together a game that was playable, we wanted to focus first on functionality and a really basic implementation, rather than doing a really detailed design and writing really robust systems from the start, because that allowed us to get a lot of the functionality up really early, so that we could see what was working and what wasn't working, and you can gain extra insights that inform your future design decisions. And so the idea is that we kind of implement stuff in a quick and dirty fashion, but keep in mind that it's going to be rewritten, that it's going to be refactored, and that lets us be a little bit more thoughtful with how we kind of push that stuff in, rather than keeping everything in one function. We might break things out because we know that we want to expose particular function calls down the track when we make things more solid, and that feels like it's been a way for us to get things up and running and get things to know that things are working before we invest a huge amount of time in sort of refined and polished versions of things. Because I feel like having things come together like that and having the opportunity to see the insights that you can get from those experiences is more valuable than having a super robust and stable implementation. And of course you can do optimization later. We sort of take notes as we go and go, yep, this is how we're going to optimize this is how we're going to optimize that, but the focus to start with is just to get the functionality up. Another thing that was fairly high priority for me was to make sure that all of our assets were human readable text files. So all of the definitions of the scenes, all of the definitions of the puzzles, all of the definitions of the objects within the scenes, they're all things that you can write in a text editor. And while there's some content tools I've been working on, I really wanted to make sure that they weren't a dependency, they weren't something that was required. Because the problem with requiring that you work with tools is that if your tools bust up, or if there's a bug in them, or if you need to, you can't quite find the time to give them some feature or some piece of polish they need, then that slows you down. But if you know that you've got the ability to work with your assets in a sort of less tool dependent way, then when you do have tools, if something goes wrong, you've got an easy fallback. And this has been a problem for me when I've worked with stuff like Unity, I guess, where it's difficult to edit scenes or prefabs or anything else outside of the Unity editor. And sometimes if you just wanna dump a music folder in a file, dump a music file in a folder and have the game just immediately pick it up without having to change anything. That sort of stuff's really nice, and that's sort of stuff I want to make sure that I can do, rather than require explicitly the use of editing tools and content creation tools. So it's prototype builds. I'm going to give a quick look at one or two early builds that kind of show off the evolution of the game as it is now. There are other prototypes that explore different ways of interpreting the core concept that I might come into later. But just to show the progression of what we've got at the moment, I wanted to show off what was going on. So let me fire that up. A lot of alt tabbing here. Whoop, that's not what I want. That's what I want. Oh, fantastic. Just bear with me a sec. I lost some of my settings when I restarted things last night. Alright, that's good. It's alright, next one will be much faster. There we go. So this is an early build. You can see we've got a compass up there. You can see we've got the monospace font that I talked about. And you can see it's running at 920 frames a second. That's exciting. So I can move the mouse right and look around. I'm looking slightly downward at the moment. There's no vertical orientation indicator. So let's look up. So if you're looking at nothing, you get this kind of generic scene description, which says that we're standing in a clearing and that there's a tree in front of us, wherever that may be. There's something off to the east, there's something off to the south, and there's a dragon somewhere. And the idea is that the text for the scene encourages you to look around and discover the things that are mentioned there. So if we look around, we can probably find the tree. And you can see that the color kind of changes a bit. If we look up, looking up, we see the sun, hooray! We hurt our eyes or something. And if we look down, we see the ground, it's kind of dark and a little bit more brown. So let's keep looking around. We see a tree. We see something else, maybe. Oh, there's a dragon. Yeah, so this is just kind of a proof of concept. The stuff in the scene is just cubes, different colored cubes sitting around the place. There's a wall somewhere. I don't know where the wall is. Hey, there's a wall. Yeah, so that's where we sort of first started to play around with those. Someone commenting on my my poor slow machine, and I might give a very quick look at what the same thing looks like with the 3D geometry enabled, so that you can just get a sense of what that means. There we go. Sweet. Okay. So yeah, we look around. We can see that there's a tree there. The dragon is over here, and I've lost my mouse lock. There we go. There's a dragon. There's our wall. A path. And the sun up there. So yeah, the idea that you can look around a 3D space. I guess the sense of these things existing is much higher when you can't see the 3D stuff in the background and you can't see how blocky everything looks. But having them there does kind of provide that background tinting as well. So it feels like it's I don't know, that says to me that something is working and that it's interesting. And the other thing I wanted to show off, partly because it looks so terrible, which doesn't sound very reassuring at all, was one of my early HMD prototypes, which, just bear with me a tick while I get that behaving as it should. If I can remember my password. There we go. Alright, let's try that again. One of the problems with the like this really early version of the head-mounted display API that I was using is that it's not very good at detecting the device, and sometimes you need to unplug it and plug it back in, which is irritating when you're in the middle of something like a dev stream. But yeah, I wanted to show off like the early HMD, like the very first time we got it working. Yeah, there it is, sweet. Alright, let me bring this back up. Sweet. Obviously I can't put this on while I'm wearing headphones. It's probably going to go clunk when I put it on my face anyway. But, here we go. So, looking down at the ground at the moment, we look up, we can sort of see the stuff's going on. There's the sun over here behind me. There's a wall. I don't know where the dragon is. There it is, hooray! But yeah, sort of being able to see all this stuff happen and being able to just kind of look around with the headset. This particular prototype, even though the text is flickering and it's not aligned properly and it's really terrible, this prototype was the first one that made me go, yeah, okay, the head-mounted display stuff is working. And so I thought it would be nice to share that even things that don't work properly and things that don't look right, they're interesting, you know? Like, that's kind of inspiring to kind of go, it looks like crap, but it's what informed the decisions that I ended up making that moved us in the final direction that the game went. People commenting on my lovely little terminal beep there. Okay, where were we? Prototypes. So yeah, down the track I'm going to show probably some more prototypes and stuff, and talk about the way that we went about selecting which one we were going to go with. But for now, that's all I was going to show there. So also doing a little bit of programming with me is Henry Bush, who has been a programmer for the past 15 years, I think it is. He teaches programming at a local school here. He's also my dad, and when he heard that I had been making some games, he was really excited by that, and wanted to pitch in. Mostly he's kind of been doing a little bit of proof of concept code, a little bit of prototyping here and there. But it's kind of nice to have someone to just kind of go, here, you think about this so I don't have to, and when he comes back with something, we can talk about where it's at, or to have somebody to bounce some of these design decisions off, and to bounce implementation considerations off. So it's really helpful to have a second person. Sadly, I don't have him here with me today, but I'm sure he's here in spirit, like at the end of Star Wars. So libraries. Like I said, we moved away from JMonkey Engine and went with SDL and OpenGL. So at the moment, we're using SDL2, SDL2 Mixer. So SDL2 we use for windowing and input. This is what allows us to create a game window, whether it's full screen or whether it's windowed or whatever else, on a whole stack of different platforms. And it also lets us read input, so from mice and keyboards and whatever else, on a whole range of platforms. So that like immediately cuts out a huge amount of work. SDL2 Mixer is what we use to play the audio. it also provides us with the simple positional sound implementation that we're using, which, as I said, is only stereo. So the information that we give the engine is how far away the sound is, which influences its volume, and what bearing the sound has. So that's 0 degrees or 360 degrees is straight ahead, 180 degrees is behind, and so you just give it an integer value that represents the number of degrees. And that's pretty easy to work with. So, cross-platform support, which I just sort of almost mentioned. 99% of everything I've written has been, everything I've written has started on Linux, and then 99% of that has just worked on Windows and Mac OS. So to give you an idea of the things that I've done that have to have been platform specific, I have a couple of what we call if-defs, which in C++ that allows you to kind of go, if we're on this platform, or if we recognize that there's this environment when we're compiling it, then do this thing. So I have an if-def that includes windows.h, and another ifdef which provides a function called winmain. And these two allow us to be called by the way that that Windows likes to launch applications. The other ifdef that I've got for Windows is a file separator string, because the file separator that we use when we look at a file path, so it might be c:/something. On Windows, that's a backslash, but if you're viewing something on Mac OS or Linux or any sensible operating system, that's a /. And so what I do is a kind of define a string to be a /, but if it's on Windows, then I use the ifdef to set it back to be a backslash. And since a backslash is an escape character, it's got to be 2 backslashes. Thanks, Windows. And, well, thanks DOS. Thanks Microsoft in general. As far as macOS specific stuff goes, we've only got one ifdef at the moment, and that's because Apple decided that the OpenGL header should live somewhere else, as everyone else puts it in one place, and Apple's all, no, it's going to live here now. So, yeah, we get to live with that. I have had some small cross-platform hurdles. When I first tried to get my Mac builds up and running, and I think Lumi and Anton in chat will remember this, that I had a lot of trouble getting my my Mac builds up and running early on, and it turned out that I had a bad install of GCC, which is a compiler that turns your source code into programs that you can run. I had a bad install that I couldn't install Xtools over properly, and it took me a while to work out what I had to remove to allow it all to work properly. I've found that using MinGW, and I've totally, it's not in wine. Get out of here! What are you doing? Nobody saw that. So I'm using MinGW to expose. Hang on. I'm using MinGW to build Windows applications from Linux, and that's cool. That's awesome to have the ability to do that. But I suck at configuring it and getting it to work with the libraries, and being able to build the libraries that I needed was a bit of a pain in the backside. Once I got my bad GCC install removed on Mac OS, Clang was the compiler that I ended up using there, and that ended up being fine. It's interesting. It's actually really cool. I like that I'm compiling it with 2 compilers, because it means that I can keep my source code clean of compiler specific idiosyncrasies, I guess. They've got different levels of default tolerance for stuff, and so being able to kind of just get hints of what Clang considers to be a decent warning versus what GCC considers to be a decent warning means I got 2 opportunities to catch stuff that I might otherwise not think to look for. I found debugging in Wine to be a bit of a pain in the backside, um, and I know that it can be done. I just haven't cared enough to learn how to do it properly. And when I've had some bugs before, I've found that the behavior of uninitialized memory in Wine is very different to the behavior of uninitialized memory in Windows, which made it hard to identify a couple of bugs that were reported back to me. But since they were problems in the source code that were present on Linux and Mac OS and everywhere else, I don't really feel like that's a really some meaningful problem. It just means that if you are trying to reproduce problems in Wine, you're going to find that sometimes things are just going to behave a little bit different if it's those kind of weird memory management problems. And then the other thing that I want to say about all of this, and I'm going to highlight it here, is that these are tiny, tiny problems. These are not even remotely significant. And the fact that I haven't had any meaningful problems at all, and that I've been able to deploy to Mac OS, Linux, to Windows, to everything, has been absolutely sweet, and a testament to I don't know. It's like I say to people, it's not that hard to write cross-platform code, and people go, "Oh no, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work." Well, I don't know. I haven't had any problems, and that's a good thing. So the engine itself, I wanted to have a bunch of diagrams here and some entity relationship diagrams to talk about how some of the stuff within the game is interacting and related. I wanted to do some message chase diagrams to talk about how the logic of the program like flows between the different systems in the engine, and a few other bits and pieces. But I didn't have any of that kind of stuff up and ready in time for this, so a future stream I will go into that sort of stuff in a bit more detail. But I guess the main core systems that we have and that we are refining at the moment are the resource loader, and the idea, or the role, the job of the resource loader is to load things from the file system. So everything else says to the resource loader, go get me this puzzle, or go get me this sound, or go get me the geometry for this object. And the resource loader is all, yep, I'm going to go and get it. And that also will handle caching eventually as well, so that if I want to make it so that everything is unloaded as soon as it's not needed, then the resource loader will handle that and then just load it on demand. Or if I want to preload everything, then the resource loader can handle that, and I won't have to worry about changing that kind of behavior inside the state manager or inside the renderer or whatever. So the idea of compartmentalizing that type of functionality off to the side, that seems really smart. Or at least at the moment, it seems really smart. I'm sure that in 6 months' time, when everything's done, and that's my vague kind of estimate for time frame at the moment. Don't hold me to that. That's, you don't know how long something's taken until you've finished it. But in 6 months' time, I might go, oh, that was a terrible idea, and I solved it by doing it in this much, much better way that I currently don't know about. But for now, it seems like a good way to go. The state manager is an exciting one. A couple of the other adventure games that I've been involved with have suffered. I don't know. Suffered's not a right word. There's the ability to get into a bad state. And if the game thinks that you've done something that you haven't done, then it prevents you from doing things that you shouldn't be able to do until you've done something previously. And so you can wind up in these kind of invalid states where you can't progress, and that always seemed a bit weird to me. So, and a lot of that comes down to like the I don't really want to kind of get deep into my interpretation of programming paradigms and criticizing other people's interpretations of programming paradigms, but everybody really likes this idea of object-oriented programming, and that's fine. It's cool. Nothing wrong with that. In this case, I've decided that the objects are not objects in the scene. Objects are puzzles. Objects are tasks and and their properties are the dependencies that they have between them, because the objects that you represent don't have to be the real world objects that the player is interpreting or that the user is meant to be experiencing here. The first class objects deserve to be the central things that the piece of software is about, and in this case, the piece of software is about solving puzzles and getting text descriptions, and so the first class objects need to be geared towards and need to be oriented around that sort of stuff. So the state manager is like this sort of central mass. Everything says what is going on, what state is everything in, what's the correct description for this object at this point in time, and the state manager goes, yep, you're at this point in this puzzle, here's the right description. And because that's all self-contained, it's harder for things to get out of sync. It's harder for me to write a puzzle and then change it in a way that breaks everything, because a state manager can tell me that it's broken before the game starts. So, this kind of idea that that having a robust state manager that's able to keep track of all of this stuff for you and let you know, I'll let you avoid these kinds of invalid state problems, because the problem with invalid state problems is that they're not expected. You don't ever expect that anybody will be able to get into the locked room until they have the key to open the door, because if they don't have the key to open the door, they can't get back out. Like those kinds of problems are easy to avoid if the game says, because you are in the room, you obviously have the key, and derive the perceived player state from the actual puzzle state. So there's that. That's exciting. And still in development at the moment. Currently refactoring and refining some of that at the moment. That's what's been eating up all of the development time that I had in March. But yeah, so that's fun. The input handler is all about abstracting away the player's interactions with the game, so that when I press when I press the left mouse button, or when I press, I don't know, A on a gamepad, or space on the keyboard, or whatever, that the input handler intercepts all of those signals and then emits it as the same action to the rest of the game. Somebody has heard that I waste precious dev time on eating food. This is not true. I do not eat food. I only drink juice. So yeah, the input handler allows us to add in new input devices without changing anything outside of the input handler. So again, like the resource handler, compartmentalizing all of that aside to one place where excuse me, compartmentalizing that away to one place where changes to it are low impact. And the other part of the game at the moment is the renderer, which basically is attached to the main game loop and draws stuff. So you say, how we do it at the moment is we draw the entire 3D scene first, and then we grab all of the pixels from that, and then we discard it. We work out what the color average is based on what's visible in the viewport, and then we tint the background color based on that. And then we draw the text over the top. So even though we render out the 3D geometry, you never actually get to see it. We kind of stomp on it before it gets shown to the or before it gets put on the screen, which is cool. I want to rework that. I want to kind of create stacks and queues where the game can say, all right, well, here's a big list of stuff that we want rendered. You take that and go away and deal with it. At the moment, the renderer's got a lot more direct interaction with the input side of things and the state side of things, which I'd like to take out. Because by doing that, I put myself in a better position to expose a lot of the core game logic, the way that the input handler interacts with the rest of the game, or the way that the state manager interacts with the rest of the game, and even the way that the resource loader is called. I want to eventually abstract that out into some kind of scripting interface, so that might be It might be Lua, or it might be Python, or it might be JavaScript, or whatever. But the idea of being able to separate the just the behavior, or like the idea of like anything that I can give a convenience method for, anything that I can make fast, want to put that in the C++ side of things. But anything that controls what the game is, the glue that binds it all together, if I can put that into a scripting language that is like either interpreted or just in time compiled, then the engine itself can be a lot more flexible. So the stuff that you can do with it is significantly broadened. I'd like to make something that I can use for different things. I'd like to make something that I can open source and different people could, you people watching now, you could use it for something. And not just this kind of text-oriented adventure game. It feels like the same kind of thing is really easy to switch to like one of those locked room puzzle games. Doesn't feel like there's a huge gap between what I'm doing now and that sort of stuff. It'd be nice to be able to make something like Hoverdrive in it, which is a OpenGL example game that I made alongside one of my prototypes for Winter's Wake last year. I was sort of planning to present Winter's Wake, but it wasn't ready, and I was like, well, how much of this code can I take and do something interesting with? And I made this little first-person radio-controlled hovercraft simulator where you have a fixed location again that you look around, so same kind of thing, except the WSD controls move a radio-controlled hovercraft around the scene, and so you can drive around, you can turn around and look at where it is that you're driving to, and that's fun. It's kind of neat, and I'd like to be able to go. I'd like to be able to kind of take this engine and be able to do that sort of stuff with it without needing to adjust any of the programming. And if I can do that, then you can kind of go, alright, well, here's the engine build, edit a couple of text files, suddenly it's a different game. And that is what I see as being powerful about an engine. If you can do that without significant compile time overheads, and without having to, if you don't have to touch the C++ side of stuff, then your chances of doing something, provided that I've written everything well, your chances of exposing a bug or doing something that breaks the engine itself are lowered. But yeah. Things that are working well at the moment, I'm doing some very quick and dirty raycasting. It's not really raycasting as well. Since everything is colored, at the time that I create the geometry, I go, alright, if this color already exists, give it a different color that's like one numeric value off or something. And I check to see what the middle pixel on the screen is to work out what people are facing. And that's nice and fast, that's great. But really, it's not, I don't know, it's not the right way to do things, and it's not the way that I want to do things. So again, I talked about having convenience methods for working stuff out. I probably do have some API for or functions for exposing raycasting to the scripting side of things. Delayed description fade-ins. So I'm going to show the current build in a little bit. You saw in the prototype builds that when I looked around, the text changed immediately as soon as I looked at something, and so that meant that there was a bit of the text would flicker out, disappear and be replaced by some other text instantly as I crossed the boundary of an object or something. And at the moment, what I do is I make it so that the headings are what you see straight away, but the descriptive text comes in later, and that means that you're encouraged to focus on what it is that the headings tell you, and use that to sort of decide if you want to linger on there long enough for the description to come up. And that, when I put that delay or fade in, it really made things feel a bit more I don't know, solid, a little bit less flighty, a little bit less transient, and it made the headings feel like they had a lot more presence, because I found that some people, some really early testers, weren't reading the headings, they were only reading the descriptive text. Alright, and Apo in chat has just mentioned something that I already had plans to do. Let's put an A in here, hey? There we go, that's better. Which is... well, I'll get to that in a minute. So yeah, delayed scene transitions as well. So at the moment, when you travel from... I don't know, you pick a road and you go down it. It used to be instant, and because when you're in a forest, you know, often everything's green, sometimes the colors of the scenes look generally the same, and it's not immediately apparent that you have actually moved. So what I did was I put I think it's a 2-second delay at the moment, between, like, it fades out to black and then fades back in the new location, and having that delay there, having that forced delay, and I mentioned this earlier, having forced delays in there really make you feel like something's happening. I want to have a loading icon to help reinforce that progression is going on, but forcing those delays really helps separate the moments that the player is experiencing and making sure that they do feel distinct. So that's really cool. Positional audio, I mentioned earlier, that's working really well. It's really neat to be able to just kind of, you know, you hear something off to the right, and you look over there, and you go, oh, there's this thing that's making this sound, I'm going to interact with it, or I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to find out about it. It's cool. The background tinting stuff is working really well. I'll be able to show a bit more of that in the current build in a sec. And I've also got icons in there to kind of show what's going on. Like, I've got... This is being presented as sort of a single verb point-and-click adventure game type interactions, right? And the problem that I have with a lot of single verb point-and-click adventure games, such as, say, Machinarium, Botanicula, Broken Age, you know, this kind of modern things, even Sword and Sorcery, I guess, but there's not really a lot of interacting that you do there. And Walking Dead. Walking Dead is a really good example. So, there's a scene in one of the episodes where, like, right at the beginning, you find there's this woman, she's calling out for help, she's being attacked by a couple of zombies, and you have an option to shoot her or to run away. Now, the game presents this to you as a crosshair, and you move the crosshair over the woman, you click the button, it shoots her, and you get to run away, or you don't shoot her, you leave it, and you run away on your own. Or you run away automatically by not doing anything. And so this is like the whole idea is that it's meant to be an opportunity for the player to act or not act. That's the choice that's being presented there. But it's not clear. You can move the crosshair over the zombie and think that you're shooting the zombie, but it turns out that you're shooting the woman. And the problem with a lot of single verb point-and-click adventure games is that you know that you can interact with something, but you have no idea what type of interaction it is that you're doing. With multiple verb point-and-click adventures, when you use the open verb, you know that you're going to try and open something. When you use the talk to verb, you know that you're going to talk to someone. Compared to a single verb adventure game where, you know, there's a person standing on the edge of the cliff, you think you want to talk to them, you click the button to interact with them, and it turns out that you're pushing them off the edge. So that's like, there's a little bit of ambiguity about what goes on there, and I wanted to make sure that I had some little cue to let people know what's going on. And I've got some placeholder icons in there at the moment. There's like, if there's a path or an exit or something like that, you can, there's a footprint icon. If there's a window and you can put something through it, then there'll be a defenestrate icon. No, there aren't any windows that you can defenestrate things through at the moment, but I spotted that somebody mentioned that, so it makes people happy. But yeah, so if you can pick something up, there's an icon of a hand reaching down to pick something up. Just these kind of little cues to inform the player what type of action they might be performing when they hit that use button. And I think that that's really cool, and I've been enjoying that. So now I'm going to jump across. I'm going to show you the current dev build. You people are probably the first people to see it ever, which is cool, but it's not notably different from the gameplay video that's already on the Winter's Wake website, which is less cool. But so it's exciting for me that I'm showing it to you, but it's probably not that exciting to you because you've already seen it in the video. Pyoink. Okay, you can already hear that positional audio. I think Hitbox will stream stereo to us. Let me get the game up. You hear the lovely birds. Like, even this is the thing about the ambient audio. Like, even without seeing the text, there's so much that the audio's already told you. You're in some kind of forested scene. It sounds kind of echoey, so that there's probably isn't a lot of underbrush. There are a couple different species of birds tweeting at different distances and stuff. They're tweeting hashtags that I can understand. But you know, you just kind of get this sense of environment. It's really cool. I don't know who Kate is, but cool. Alright. Let's bring that up to the front. There we go. So we're currently looking at the sky. This triangle indicator on the right-hand side of the screen, it indicates how far up or down we're looking. So I've increased the amount between this and the other prototypes that we looked at. I've increased the amount of color tinting that's going on. Here we see that the ground is brown. The sky is kind of green because we've got a forest canopy above us. The text, of course, says that the sky is blue, so never mind. If we look across here, it starts to get more yellow so that we know that there's a sun somewhere. You know, that's the kind of orientation cues and discoverability cues that I was trying to talk about before, when that's the benefit that the tinting provides. I will remember now that when when it gets kind of yellow like this and I'm looking upwards, I'm probably looking at the sun again. So if I want to find the sun again, I know what to look for. Or if I happen to be looking in this way, I'll know what's nearby. So here's our path leading into the woods. We see the icon, the footsteps icon down the bottom. You can see the thing that I was talking about now. The only thing that kind of flickers in is the heading, and so you can absorb that much faster than you can absorb the rest of the text, and that makes it easier to at a glance. I don't know if glance is the right term, but at a glance you can kind of interpret a lot more of what's going on. Something that I didn't have before is the current scene name at the top of above the compass, and that's something that I will probably keep. But right now, it's just whatever file name the scene thing has. So I will need to, find a way to present that nicely. But yeah, we can hear that there are birds off different sides. If we actually go towards the birds, we'll end up deeper in the forest, which is cool. We can also hear that there's this white noise, and it's very clearly coming from the southeast. So if I look to the southeast, there's a mountain path that I can follow. If we head off here, we'll end up at a lake, and the lake will give us the opportunity to be a lot closer to this waterfall. So this is this thing that I was talking about. Some people are asking about what stuff I use or what libraries I'm currently using. It looks like SDL Image is currently not included in that list. SDL2 Mixer provides a very basic positional audio thing. It's only stereo, but because you're moving your head around to explore the scene, I feel like, at least at the moment, maybe I might decide later that I want to add more complex audio subsystem in, but for now, stereo seems to convey the right kind of level of stuff. Because you're moving your head around, you feel that stereo panning, and that's enough. I probably will want to get some ability, because with the head-mounted display, you can tilt your head sideways and stuff. So I probably want to have the ability to amplify things that are above you or below you, depending upon what your tilt along the forward axis is. But yeah, like maybe that might happen. I don't really know where I want to go there. But yeah, we're gonna head off to follow this mountain. that goes off into the east, and this will take us to the lake, where we'll be able to hear the waterfall is louder. And again, this is this kind of way to feel like you're actually moving around the place. So it's a lot louder. It still comes from the south, because we're not actually at the waterfall yet. I'm noticing that I'm probably needing to talk a little bit louder to be heard above the audio, which is cool. It's fine. This is all part of the experience that I want to give people. I don't expect people to be talking when they play. I expect people to be listening and reading when they play. But yeah, so we can look towards the waterfall. We hear a lot of it. There's actually 3 samples, I think, that I've got at this point going on, and they're all positioned slightly differently, so that as you move around, you get a sense of different things happening. So I think at the moment I've got like the higher pitched parts coming from more from the right, and the lower pitched parts coming more from the left, and I don't know, it just helps it feel like it exists within the 3D space a little bit more than a single sample would, I think, which is cool. Yeah, so footsteps across those transitions are something that we want to do as well, but currently we don't have those. We're going to talk about footstep sounds a little bit later. But I'm going to go in closer to the waterfall. Things are going to get a bit louder. The thing that I wanted to convey with the waterfall is, like, I don't know if any of you have ever stood like right next to a significantly sized waterfall. The thunderous sound is overwhelming, and it's really it's really neat. So I'm going to go there. You're not going to be able to hear me talking. I'll come back, but we can enjoy it. So there's a waterfall here, and if we look around, we can hear it panning from left to right, which is really cool. Hooray! There we go. Alright, so yeah, again, there are multiple water samples positioned slightly differently, so that as you look around, you can get a sense of like the waterfall being around you and stuff. It's really cool. In the final game, there will be stuff to do at the waterfall, which is fun. Oh, and we've got a piece of music at this particular one. Yeah, so we know we're in a forest. We can head east. I didn't actually want to show off the music just yet. We're outside the village. We can continue east to go into the village, wherever the gates are. Northeast? No, I just want to head east. Yeah. Where is it? It's hiding from me. Oh, you know what? I don't think I had the gate geometry actually in here. So I'm going to press a button. Again, you know, like, I feel like the text is the stuff that I want to present. I don't really want to present this kind of 3D geometry that's going on behind the scenes, but it's here, you know, like, you can look around, you can see what's going on. Most of these rectangles are going to turn into circles, because circles make for easier click targets. But there is meant to be the ability to continue east, and I've just forgotten to include that. So no wonder I couldn't find the location I wanted to go. Yeah, so let me quit out of that. Boink. That's the current dev build, and that's exciting. There's a question about points and score and objectives and stuff. I'm going to come back to that later, so hang around, and if I don't mention it in the meantime, I'll have a question and answer opportunity at the end, so keep that in the back of your mind. So yeah, moving on, things that are on the to-do list as far as the engine goes are to improve the raycasting. I said I wanted to do proper raycasting rather than my quick and dirty thing at the moment. The game has cutscenes. So there's an intro, where the text is like there's an opening crawl, the text moves up the screen, and you get to hear some music in the background that really kind of sets the tone and stuff. Um, which is really cool. Currently, that's only in some prototyping stuff. It's not in the game itself, so I want to bring that in and make it work more nicely than the prototype currently does. I want to have the ability to have pagination for long text or for small screens where I still need to keep a big font size. So I want to make sure that the player has the ability to control moving to the next page or scrolling if that's the thing that ends up happening there. And I want to find a nice way to be able to bring that functionality in without overly complicating the interface. So I want to make it so that you can play the game only with a 3-button mouse. So left click for use, scroll wheel to scroll, right click for inventory, or something like that. So it's really, really simple, 1 or 2 buttons, and that's it. How to map that into the head-mounted display, I'm not 100% sure. Gamepads shouldn't be a problem. Keyboard's not a problem. But I still, like I said before, really want to keep things fairly simple, because that allows me to the simpler the controls are, the more devices I can target, really. And like I said before, the more simple things are, the less the less complicated things seem, the less opportunity for confusion there is, etc., etc. I mentioned though I want to have the loading icons in there. I want to have save support. There's no support for saving at the moment, which is kind of sad. And a few more orientation cues. Apo in chat mentioned that you could make it so that the headings move in from the origin of the object that you're looking at, and that's something that I actually have on my roadmap to implement, but I need proper raycasting for that, obviously. I can't do that with my quick and dirty color matching stuff because it doesn't tell me where anything actually is. I don't have any knowledge of location based on that. So if I'm gonna do raycasting and then do point of origin calculations for where the center of mass for the objects that you're looking at are, then sort of want to bring all that in at the same time. But yeah, that's definitely an aspect that I think will help make things a bit easier to discover. So if you're like right on the edge of something and the heading is you're just coming into it from the left and you're only on the right edge of it, having the heading appear slightly off to the left and moving towards the center as you come closer means that it's going to be easier to work out where it is if you're having trouble spotting it. Or likewise, if you fall off the edge of it and the heading moves off to the left, that lets you know that that's where it is if you want to go back to it. So that's really cool. And at the moment, the way that I am averaging the color is a little bit brute force. I am reading out every single pixel value for all of the color channels and then adding them all together and then dividing them by the total number of pixels and then manually calculating the resulting color based off the base tint that I have for the backgrounds. There's a faster way I can do it, which is to just use a 1x1 map of the scene, which is going to be much faster, and it's going to happen on the GPU rather than on the CPU. So that's something that I'm going to do at some point as well. But yeah, the reason I wanted to share the to-do stuff was because, like I say, I kind of focused on functionality first, but I come up with all this stuff that needs doing along the way. It's important to, at least for the way that I work, it's important to not get too bogged down in polishing one thing up to a shine. For me, I find it's better to make a to-do list of things that I know, or things that I have noticed as I go, so that I can stay on track with the things that I want to achieve, and then have a list of things that I can go and look at later if I need, which is really cool. There are things that I want to do down the track that I'm not sure how I'm going to approach, and they include text effects and rich text support. So I want to have the ability to do italicization or make things bold. when it feels appropriate to do so. I don't want to overuse that stuff, but like, let's say you walk up to a dragon. It would be nice if every time there's a word dragon in the description, it's red and it glows with fire or something like that. So text effects as well. Drawing a bit of inspiration there from some of the really awesome stuff that Cardboard Computer are doing with Kentucky Route Zero. I really love their work, and I really love the way that they present stuff and the way that they use effects on the text to convey different types of or to support different atmospheres and stuff. I really, really think that's awesome, and that's something that I'd love to be able to bring to this game as well. I'd like to have background effects too, which would be independent, I think, of the background tinting. So let's say that let's say that we've got a scene where we're underwater, and like when you're underwater, there's the dappled light comes through and it shifts a bit, and it's got this kind of constantly moving sense to it as things get like slightly brighter and slightly darker as they pass through different angles of the water and refract in different ways. I'd like to be able to just kind of have the ability for backgrounds to have more natural dynamic stuff like that. So if you were in a cave next to a fire or something, that it could flicker a little bit, get a little bit redder, get a little bit yellower, and just kind of help support that sense of presence. So alongside that, you'd also have the sounds of a fire crackling around you, and you'd also have the text describing its warmth and that sort of thing. So like all of these things come together to combine that to build that sense of place and support that sense of presence. Dialogue trees is not something that, or are not something that I currently have support for. I'm on the I'm at a point where I would be comfortable not having them, I think, but the opportunity to include them would let me make a lot of the characters feel more alive within the world, I guess. The ability to choose what it is that you talk about them, rather than only talk about the thing that you have to talk about them to progress. Talk about with them to progress the puzzle. Talk with them about to progress a puzzle. Words. Yeah, like if you've got the ability to choose what it is you're saying and you can explore the conversation there, then that provides additional possibility space that the player can move around in, and gives the player a little bit more sense of control over what happens. So if I can find a nice way to make dialogue trees happen and to make them fit well with the kind of interface constraints that I'm putting upon myself, then I'll totally put them in, because they're sweet. I want to have a journal or a log so that if you knew that you saw something back at the waterfall, but you're all the way back at the cliff and trudging through the snow, and you realize something, that you don't have to go back. Sorry, you don't have to backtrack to double check information that you should already know. So I want to have some kind of journal or log system. I'm not sure whether that's going to be something like I don't know whether that's going to be something like a summary of what you've seen that mentions all of the important things, or whether it's going to be a verbatim copy of everything that you've read already, so that you can read back through them. I kind of don't like the idea of doing the summary thing, because that's me telling the player what to pay attention to, rather than the player reading the things and discovering what they have to pay attention to, or working out what they have to pay attention to. But at the same time, a summary thing is a lot easier to digest, and there's a lot of writing in this game. There's a lot of reading to do, so optimizing that is going to be helpful. Scriptability I talked about earlier. I'd like to move a lot of the stuff that makes the game what the game is out to scripting languages, which would be really cool. And something that I meant to put in this list last night when I wrote it, but completely forgot until just a few minutes ago, was localization. So I want to have the ability to support other languages and stuff. because all of the content is stored in plain text files, I could just create a duplication of everything. But like as far as the definition files for the objects and the scenes and the puzzles and stuff, they're not just descriptions, they're also positions and information to information to tell the game how to show something. And the other thing, which I just remembered, screen. That's not how we spell screen. Screen reader support. I want to be able to support screen readers for blind people, and some people have, like a lot of people that I've shown. I don't know. Some people, not a lot of people. A few people that I've shown or described the concept to seem really fixated on the idea of narration. And narration is awesome, and that's something I'd like to support. But again, I think you interpret things differently when you hear them versus when you read them. And the opportunity for the player to project their own interpretation of tone, their own interpretation of pacing of writing and stuff. When you write things, to be read out loud, when you write things to be spoken, you write them differently to when you write them to be read. And this is very evident in, say, the special edition of Monkey Island 1, for example, where all of the lines were written to be read, and some of them feel a little bit stilted, and the timing is off for some of the jokes and stuff when Dom's voice is voicing Guybrush or whoever's voice is voicing other characters. That doesn't mean that the actors are bad. It just means that the lines are a little bit awkward for speaking. And I feel like the kind of game that I want to make here, or the kind of game that I'm making here, is a game that's about reading and not about listening to voice. The other problem with narration is that narration would stomp all over the music, and narration would stomp all over that lovely positional ambient sound. So I want to make sure that the first things that you hear are the ambient sound, that the sound is part of your first impression of a scene. That environmental audio and the music cues that we put in there. Now, I just added screen reader support because I'd like to make sure that this is accessible to blind people, and I don't think that narration is the right solution to that. I think that support for screen readers is the right solution for that, because screen readers are what people who use screen readers are used to hearing for written text. If it's a person reading it, then that becomes a performance, which is a different kind of thing. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that very well. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that in a way that might be offensive to anybody who uses screen readers. If I am, I'm very sorry. But yeah, I want to remove the performance aspect, or want to make sure that there's no performance aspect to any oral interpretation of the text, or oral presentation of the text descriptions. Right, so now I'm moving on to plot stuff, which is exciting. It's also where the spoiler stuff is going to come in, so anybody who doesn't want... if anybody doesn't want to catch any of that, then now's the time to hop out. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you for hanging around. It's been really cool to watch the chat and try very, very hard to not be distracted by it, but I will continue to go on. And this time look at some of the content stuff. So the first thing we're going to look at is plot and story, and the pacing of that and the structure of that. There's going to be a couple of images in here that are going to be impossible to see. I'm going to make the slideshow that I'm working from here available as well, and I think I'm going to make some of the diagrams and images that are part of this available to my Patreon supporters. But I might keep those a little bit more private, for not publicly accessible until after the game itself is released. So yeah, I guess the core one of the core things that we talked about was like this sense of presence and this sense of space. And so from that, I guess there were a couple of locations that I wanted to think about or wanted to put in there, and by thinking about the relationships with those locations, I started to refine the world map, as it were. And so that's what that came before any of the plot, really. And I have it here. I don't have it scanned because I used a 2H and it's not really possible to scan it. But this stuff that you cannot see here on this seemingly blank page is my very first attempt at the map. So that's exciting. The idea behind the map here, though, is that it's a tool for me to be able to construct something that feels believable, rather than something that players will see. I don't want the map to be shown in game. I want players to build that map in their mind as they play, which is the kind of thing that you would do when you play an older traditional text adventure. Is that you might take notes, or you might not, depending upon how complex the world is. But it all exists in your imagination first. That's the place where you write it down from. Like it's not like there's a reference that you're copying from. It's your imagination and your interpretation of what's going on that you do things from. So that's really cool. And so this is like, I've shown a little bit of background geometry. I'm going to show a piece of concept art or two as well. All of this stuff, they're tools for development, but they're not part of the experience that I want to present with the game. So they're not going to be shipped with the game. They're not going to be extras as part of the game. They're aids for developers, and maybe interesting trivia for people who have played the game and want to learn a little bit more about it and stuff. But if somebody says, "Oh, I thought it was a longer distance from the waterfall to the fort," or something like that, I don't want to stomp on that. I don't want to change that at all. Like, if that's your interpretation, that's great. If you've come up with this spatial relationship between stuff, that's sweet. Or if you go, well, in my mind, the I don't know, the dragon was green, but in my piece of concept art, the dragon was red. Man, if you read the dragon and you thought it was green, then dragon is green for you. That's. I want people to be able to own their own experiences, and I don't want to use, I don't want to influence those experiences beyond what I'm presenting in the text. So here is not my first interpretation of the map. This is the current logical layout of the map. Yeah, the fan art for this game is going to be great. If anybody makes fan art. Yeah, so I don't think any of this is going to be legible on stream, and that sucks. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna turn on the cursor capture. Look at that. And now we should have a mouse cursor? No? Why would we have a mouse cursor? That would be helpful. Ah, there we go. Hooray! It's just not where I'm expecting it to be. Okay, so oh. Alright. Cursor capture is not as awesome as I was thinking it was going to be. So never mind that. There's... Oh, you can read it in full screen? Okay, so the avalanche/tree room. In adventure games, all of these locations would probably be called rooms, even though many of them are outdoor environments. The avalanche tree is where you start. Or you start at the intro, I guess, and that's where that opening crawl is. And then you arrive at the avalanche tree. The opening of the game has the player or the protagonist trying to take a shortcut through the mountains to get home after years of adventuring or something like that. The the idea that you've got someone who's seasoned and is, having a holiday by going home, is kind of funny to me. So that's the kind of premise that I've got there. So you go from there down to the avalanche tree. You get caught in an avalanche, which ends up blocking you in. Now, somebody in chat has just mentioned that this is a huge world. This is quite large. I don't want to count it right now, but I think it's around 30 rooms, which is pretty big. I think Monkey Island might have been 80, for example. So it's smaller than that, but it's still a very significant number. So the idea is that you get caught in the avalanche, you have a broken leg, and you can only travel so far. Your immediate goal when you start is to find someone to help you, to find the village. And so you can move from the avalanche tree to the lake, to the forest crossroads, or to the West Pass. And then from those locations, there are clear indicators that direct you towards where the village is, which means that you can't go in the wrong direction from those locations. It'll, if you try and go north from the forest crossroads, you'll get a message that says, yeah, you don't want to go this way. You really want to go towards the village because you need that healing, and stuff. And so, a lot of the plot kind of evolved out of this idea of, I'd created most of the map first, and I went, okay, so to start with, in the first act, I want to lock things down, I want to restrict the player so that they've only got a couple of scenes to explore. How can I do that? And so the idea to make them significantly injured ended up being a thing that happened there, and then that sort of brought in the need for a healer in the village, and so a lot of the map layout ended up informing some of the plot progression. Which is cool. Someone in chat has brought up this notion that that it would be cool if you could look at things in the distance, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute as well. So I want to make sure that people don't think I'm ignoring them, but it's like there's lots of possibility space to explore. This is a different kind of concept, and so presenting the concept encourages creative interpretation of what's gonna happen, and so it's really cool to see people latch onto the idea and come up with different concepts or different ways of expressing the concept. It's really cool. So anyway, what was I saying? I was talking about the map came first. So this is a logical map. This is not what the first map looks like. This is what my refinement of the map into something that fits on a grid looks like. And I feel like this is the nicest thing. If I was gonna print a manual to go with this game and give it to players, this map is what I'd give them, because this map is obviously stylized, it's obviously not to scale, it's obviously not a realistic representations of distance. And I think that's really cool, because it matches that whole thing of the text descriptions don't give you a visual representation of what's going on. You use your imagination to work out what's going on here. So we use our imaginations and we go, okay, well, I guess the grey areas are mountains, and I guess the green areas are forest, and since there's farmland in the yellow area, that stuff must be open. It doesn't tell you what the village looks like. It doesn't tell you what the crossroads look like. It's all about your imagination. This is a digital recreation of what my original map sketch looked like, which shows a lot more detail, a lot more in the way of stuff. And this is what I use to kind of work out what's a realistic distance, and what's, how would... if there's a lake here and a waterfall feeding it, where does that water come from, and where does that water go to? That kind of stuff. So, like, being able to ask myself those questions. If there was a big road going through this valley that happens to be snowed in at this point in time, where would it go, and what would its relationship to the village be? Would it pass by the village? Would it go through the village? Would it go around the village? this sort of stuff. And by thinking about these things ahead of time, you have the opportunity to make things a little bit more believable. You have the opportunity to think about all of these concerns, and even though you don't explicitly write about all of those things specifically, you may mention somewhere that that's something that happened. Like I don't know of a good example. Someone might say, "Oh, I ran from here to here and I was exhausted." Well, in the realistic relationship between the distances, I can look at that and I can go, "Yeah, that's a fair distance. That person would definitely be exhausted by the time they traveled that far." Or I could say, they were able to travel between here and here really fast, without significant delay, or that they ran from here to here, but they had to go through the ruins, which meant that maybe they slipped on something, or there was some cave in or something as they went past. Like, you have these opportunities to richen and deepen the concept of the world that you're exploring, and I'm doing a terrible job of explaining how you might take advantage of those things. So the next thing I'm going to show is a 3D representation of the same scene. Something really low polygon. The idea here is that all of those red squares represent rooms back on our other map here. So we're looking from the right hand side, from the east. This area on the right hand side here is like a cliff that leads down to a lowlands, and then this is the open farm area, and then we got the forest and the mountains behind it. So if we go back to our 3D thing, we can kind of see that same thing again. All those red squares are the different locations around the place. And what I wanted to do here was, in my 3D program, was to actually put a camera down on those red squares and look at what I could see. Could I see mountain peaks in the distance? Could I see the forest from here? Could I see the cliff from here? Like all of these kind of questions. And that's been helpful in general, from just like working out scene descriptions and how I was going to do. But like the original concept, I said I wanted to put in like normal game assets in the background that you didn't get to see. And the idea was that I was going to use this as this kind of template for the background, as this kind of alternative to like a skybox or whatever. You just have this stuff in the background. But it turned out that it was just confusing. It got in the way of solid readable color tinting, and everything was too small to really touch on in any meaningful sense. It felt like it was better to have one big blobby object and say, in the distance you see this thing when you look at it, rather than to have the actual geometry there. Because my original plan was to have everything located like this, to do raycasting against stuff and automatically determine if it was within a certain radius, then it was part of that room. If it was outside of a certain radius, it's like part of the scenery, and so we can talk about it differently. So the idea that if you're up close to the mountain, you can have a description that tells you about the rocky surface of the mountain face and stuff. But if you're a long way away, it'll tell you about the snow-capped peaks on the top or something. But really, I mean, it sounds good in theory, and it's definitely possible to make something like that happen. Like the technical considerations are not particularly complicated or insurmountable, but in terms of the actual execution, when I tried to put that stuff together, I was like, yeah, it just makes the scenes feel full and bloated and a little bit clumsy. So now I kind of have a maximum of no more than 6 entities in a scene kind of thing. And that might change a little bit over time. I might make some a little bit more complex than others, just because I want those scenes to feel crowded. But in general, it feels like it works best when I just have a generic scene description and make it so that when you look at nothing, you can see those. And that's a lot nicer than having something everywhere, if that makes sense. So that's that's just kind of to talk about this idea of there are different ways to approach things, and all of them are really cool ideas. Some of them fit with the current project, some of them don't fit with the current project. and some of them just kind of don't work in general. So, like, something that you should always do, I think, when making games, is to explore that stuff. Just as you might ask a player to explore the possibility space of an environment that you've created or a situation that you've created, as a developer, you want to explore the possibility space that your concept provides you with. You want to know where the boundaries of what fits and what doesn't fit are, because then that informs your decisions about what to cut and what to keep. Someone's asking if I've used these 3D renders as an aid. Totally, yeah. They have. Like I said, I put the camera down on those red spots and I look around, and that helps me think about what it is that I want to provide in the base description. If I put it down on the where does my mouse cursor go to? If I put it down in here, I can look around, or even at the ruins, which is invisible, which is under here. I can look around from that camera position. I can go, yeah, alright, this area is a little bit higher than this area, and in the distance we'd probably be able to see like wood smoke from the village above the tree canopy, so yeah, we can totally mention that from here. Or we might be at the lake over here, and I'll go, alright, well, we can actually see the mountains that make up the pass to the north. We should totally mention that you can see the peaks rising above the forest or whatever, or you might be here on the edge of the forest. I'm like, well, okay, looking at the curve of where the forest is, we know how much of the surrounding mountains you can see, we know how much of this stuff you can see, what's going to be obscured by the village that's in front of you, and that sort of stuff. So it is definitely helpful in that regard, and I'm really glad that I've got these things there that I can poke around with and play with. And I'm really glad that I can show you guys this stuff. Because I feel like this is the sort of thing you do. Like this, instead of being actual content, this ends up just taking the role of concept art, or animatics, or storyboards, or whatever it is that you're using as a tool to help you continue to work on and refine your game. So the plot, the setting, the place in which everything takes place was heavily inspired by Quest for Glory 1. In fact, I knew from the outset, when I decided that I wanted to do a text adventure, that I wanted to do something that had the same kind of lighthearted fantasy thing that Quest for Glory 1 has going on, and that kind of alpine mountain snow forest thing. I don't know, there's something about it that just kind of says adventure, and is really exciting to me. So I knew from the beginning that kind of setting was something that I wanted to have a look at. Quest for Glory 1 was originally released as Hero's Quest, for anybody who's wondering what that's all about. But they had a name clash, trademark issues. They decided to move on and call it Quest for Glory. And the first one was called So You Want to Be a Hero. But yeah, anyway, it's got this neat, this is really neat aesthetic and really neat sense of setting that I really liked. I wanted to kind of have something that felt like it was in that kind of generic, I don't know, maybe is it Eastern European? It might be, kind of feel. And yeah, like all of my design documents for the story and the plot, because I knew that I wanted to have this kind of setting, when I first opened up all my documents, I was like, do not copy Quest for Glory, and put that at the top of everything. It was, in some ways it was hard to do, in other ways it wasn't hard to do. I mean, I'm like, alright, yeah, so I want to have like a white stag in the forest, that's sweet, yeah. And it can lead you to like dryads or something, that's cool. I'm like, no, that's just Quest for Glory. You gotta stop doing that. But I am telling a very different story to that. But yeah, that was definitely a big inspiration there. Generally, the plot is subverting some common fantasy RPG tropes. Like, it's expected that if you're the adventurer protagonist, that you're gonna do everybody's thing. You're gonna kill everybody's rats for them, and you're gonna do all this stuff. So anything that you're presented with, you just, as a player, are used to unwittingly accept tasks and things, and it's easy to go, all right, these are the rats that I have to kill, and not think about it, you know. And so in this, we've got goblins are our enemies, or they're at the beginning of the game they're presented as our enemies, and it turns out that they're not. And so that kind of that turnaround gives us the opportunity to have something interesting happen. And it's always expected that the adventurer is going to be the central hero or the savior or the key figure that does stuff. And this is not the... people are asking in chat whether you follow white stags in the forest, and I think that yes, there's something that is irresistible about white stags in the forest. It's impossible to not follow them, and I dare anybody to try. You have to. I mean, majestic creatures. You follow them until they get angry at you and turn around and gore you to the core. But yeah. So like, there's this idea that adventurers are, the protagonist, the player character is the protagonist, and that they're the positive character, and they're always going to be doing the right thing, even when they make a mistake. It puts them on the path to making things better anyway, and whatever ultimate positive happy ending outcome there is. And while this game has a positive happy ending outcome, I don't feel like the player is really the thing that saves the day, which is really cool, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. Somebody has reminded me that this is running a bit longer than I planned, so long that I think I need a little bit more juice. Alright, here's a piece of concept art. It's just meant to be up in the mountain, looking down on the forest. Unfortunately, the scan is not very good, so where are we? Here's our forest, here. There's the village there. There's a weather station off in the distance. This is the cliff edge that runs down here, and the horizon and the ocean in the distance. For me, this was something that helped, just kind of put some of the spatial relationships in perspective. It's not a particularly amazing piece of concept art. It's just the first one that I did, and I thought I'd share it. By this point in the project, I would usually have a whole lot more concept art done, but since this is not an inherently visual, this game doesn't really have any visual components, there's not really a lot of call for concept art, so it's easy to not prioritize it. But yeah, so that's the very first piece of concept art that I ever did. The idea is that over here, this is meant to be farmland, and you're meant to kind of, I don't know, they're meant to look like paddocks or something, but they don't. And this is meant to be a tree, not a mushroom. And over on the very far left in the top corner, that's a thumb, a giant thumb. There are giants in this. The giant thumb holds the page open. Very cool. So yeah, most of the locations were defined before the story took shape, as I mentioned. So the avalanche, the waterfall, the weather station, the fort, the village, forest locations, all that sort of stuff. Some of the locations were added to fit with the story. So if we go back to our logical map here, the goblin lair at the very top, which I can't get my mouse cursor on at the moment, the Duke's offices in the fort. There are a couple other bits and pieces that came later, and they came as a part of fitting in with the story. And then also the puzzles themselves helped me work out that I wanted to have some stuff. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the puzzle stuff in a sec, which is really cool. So, like I've said, I'm going for point-and-click adventure style gameplay, which is all about kind of collecting inventory items and finding interactive elements within a scene to use them on, or to use in general, or to interact with. And I feel like using these as motivators for exploring the scenes and exploring, using the mechanics of looking around to discover stuff feels like it's a good match. The player actions end up progressing the narrative, which means that I don't have to worry about jumping in and out of gameplay all the time, and it also matches well with like with HMDs and whatever, because there's not a lot of complex interface to worry about there. and also it's more in line with the kind of stuff that you would find in traditional text adventures. Puzzles. When I first started this, I was like, yeah, this is going to be a sweet project. And then I got halfway through all the prototyping stuff that I was doing, all of the the stuff that I showed earlier, and I'm like, alright, sweet, I've got the makings of a game here. I know that the concept feels like it's going to work. And then I went, shoot, I don't know how to make puzzles. And I was terrified. So my plan originally, so here's the timeline, I guess, is I started in, I don't know, February last year, so about 12 months ago, well, more than 12 months ago, thinking about wanting to do some kind of text-oriented first-person experience. I did some on and off prototyping for the next 6 months or so, not really thinking about what the project was actually going to be in terms of the story or whatever. I just kind of settled on point-and-click puzzles, point-and-click adventure-style puzzles feel like they're a good fit. And then that's cool, that all seemed to come together. And then the plan was to actually make that into a game during the 7-day first-person challenge in 2014. And I didn't quite get it ready in time, and that was kind of sad. But it was at the start of 70 FPS that I went, holy crap, I don't know how to make puzzles. And I remembered that I'd read a post by Ron Gilbert, who is the guy that came up with Monkey Island and Maniac Mansion and a few other adventure games. And he talked about puzzle dependency charts. And then in his blog post is a link to the puzzle dependency chart for Deathspank. And it is massive. It's awesome, and it's convoluted, and it's just like node spaghetti. And I love it. It was really cool. And just kind of reading his thoughts on the benefits that provided really felt like it brought it into focus for me. So down the very bottom of this slide here is my current puzzle dependency chart, showing all of the key or all of the interactions that you can have or that you need to do to progress through the game to get to the end. And you'll see that there's a bunch of non-linear stuff, and that there are points where it does get linear. So those points where it collapses back in, they are sort of the end and beginning of a new act. Like pacing wise, it really helps. Really helps you visualize what's going on. So the first act at the moment is a couple of like really simple things, and that's like walk through a couple of scenes, get to the healer, find out that you're trapped in the valley, and can't get out until you deal with the goblin stuff. And so that's pretty straightforward, not a big deal. I might add one or two small extra things in there to get players used to interacting with things, but yeah, so it's like being able to think about what things can you interact with in each scene, put out a node for each of those, start to join them up, and think about ways in which they can be chained to create interesting and thoughtful puzzles. Like, as soon as I started to do that, everything came into focus. It was really helpful for me. And it started to make me think about, I knew that I wanted to have some non-linearity. I knew that I wanted to allow players to do things concurrently. Some people are leaving now because Guns of Icarus Online is starting, which I would normally be attending, but I'm having lots of fun talking, and for anybody who's still around, you totally listen and continue to hear what's going on. But yeah, so non-linearity is the ability to do things concurrently, but alternative solutions allows you to have different paths through the same puzzle, and by combining non-linearity and alternative solutions, and by choosing when you have one and when you have the other, you can control a lot of the apparent complexity. Like, you can make things look more complex than they are, or less complex than they are, you can make the player feel like they have more possibility space to explore, and you can give people the opportunity to feel like they're creating their own path through the story, which is really cool. Here's a close-up of what that jumbled mess, the tiny image down below that last slide looks like. This is the crescendo of the second act of the game, when you find the goblin camp and you gotta like find a way to get in, and stuff. So that's kind of shows some of the relationships there, which is really cool. I want to be able to get the the game to generate these kinds of charts eventually. That would be really cool. But obviously that's not the highest priority for me at the moment. So the things I learned from doing that were that understanding your puzzle flow and understanding your puzzle dependency can help you, solidify and shape your story and your pacing. Like pacing wise, my first thoughts about how everything would work, I like looked at it and I went, yeah, it's like there's all these weird bits where nothing's going on, and I really should put some things to do in this section, and kind of, even though players aren't necessarily going to approach it in exactly the same way as the puzzle dependency chart indicates, it does show how many things players are likely to need to think about at one point in time. I was able to identify a lot of sort of empty areas. The entirety of the third act came from me wanting to work out what puzzles would be interesting given the locations I had. I didn't really know how to wrap it up, and I was like, just put the puzzles together, and suddenly that created a narrative that I thought was interesting, and that's really cool as well. And also, there's like, because there are elements of the plot that you come across in the beginning of the game that you want to have at the end of the game so that the player has some kind of foreshadowing and that things resonate better, being able to see the puzzle dependency chart like this lets me know the points at which players can come into contact with those later plot elements. And so putting a puzzle that guides players towards something that they might want to know about later is a really nice way to kind of guide players past key plot elements without making it feel gratuitous. So sound design. I am going to bring Jasmine in if she is still around. This is the person who's working on audio here. So bear with me 1 second while I bring her up. See if she's still around.
Okay, Verge.
Hey, how's it going?
Yo, hello.
Alright, so yeah, I'm going to talk about sound stuff now. Ambient sound plays like this really big role in the game. It's not obvious, like when I talk to people about it at the beginning of the concept, people didn't kind of immediately assume that there would be lots of sound in the game. But when I put sound in the prototypes and stuff, and you got to play it and other people got to play it, it really felt like it was a much more whole experience. Like it was a lot easier to understand what was going on. Do you want to like sort of talk about your feelings from playing the prototypes and stuff?
Well, first when you told me about the project, I was already really excited about the whole concept of it, and when I got to play this build, it just brought even more excitement to it. And then I got really inspired and started thinking about all the different things that I wanted to do for the sound.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
No,
so the other thing that I'm really excited about is like that we can use audio to highlight points of interest. So like, for example, like the waterfall is off to off to the southeast or whatever, and being able to hear that in the distance lets you know that there might be something interesting if you go that way. Or if at the weather station there's a wind chime that you need to pick up or something, that we can have that wind chime effect and players will sort of hear that and look for it and then discover that they can pick it up. I feel like that's kind of really helpful as well.
Oh yeah, no, it's awesome. Especially with the whole panning effect, you actually get a feeling that you're that you're there almost.
Right, right. Um, yeah, that's really cool, and that's stuff that I was excited to kind of cover over. Now, the stuff that's in the build that I showed off earlier, that's all placeholder stuff that I put in there. And
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about how using placeholder audio can help us explore what an environment needs. You know.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely helps figure out what kind of feeling that we want for each setting, and also like what else we want to put into the game, because I know I have a lot of ideas of what each setting should be, and like
Yeah.
even like little things that'll help bring together like this whole atmosphere.
Yeah, definitely. It's like it's nice to be able to kind of just go like. Your plan at the moment is to record as much stuff as we can, and we'll probably still end up using some stock sound and stuff, and that's fine. But recording takes time, and if you don't have a roadmap for what you need, if like the ability to put stuff together fast using placeholder sounds, is like that saves a lot of time and allows you to be more efficient when it comes to deciding what you invest time in recording.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot of good websites for that. But I am trying to get enough recordings done on my own that I know during my break I was able to get quite a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Do you want to talk about that? That you went off and had a recording session?
Oh yeah, it was great. I went up to the giant forest at the Sequoia National Park with my family. And I thought it was such a good idea to just go up there and record as much as I could. The main thing I really captured was a bunch of different footsteps for
the scene
rock,
transitions and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got a lot of that. I got rock, dirt, stone, like some forest floor debris, even snow. I was able to get snow, and I was really excited about that. I didn't think there was still snow up there.
That's awesome.
But I got some good, I think I at least got some atmospheric stuff too, and I also recorded more at my home.
Yeah. So, like, one nice thing that I don't know if we're going to be able to pull it off, but we've been talking about trying to do it, is that we're going to see if we can pace the footstep sounds so that all of them match, and then crossfade between them to, like, if you're walking from the rocky cliff into the dirt road of the forest, that we can crossfade between like footsteps on pebbles or stone or whatever through to footsteps on turf or dirt or whatever, and sort of help provide that sense of transition during the fade out.
Oh yeah, no, that's gonna be great.
Yeah, I think it's like really cool to have that opportunity there. Was there anything else that you want to kind of talk about while we're on the stream? Because I sort of want to kind of get through it all, because I know that it's been a lot. It's been 2 hours already for people to listen to.
Yeah. Well, I guess I will be trying to record more because I've been working on final projects right now. I'm currently in college for sound design, so I've been getting caught up with a bunch of different things from my teachers. But I will be recording more. I am editing a whole bunch. I've been using Pro Tools and Logic, all for different reasons. I really like Pro Tools. Pro Tools is great. But I'm still extremely excited to be a part of this. It's already been so much fun. Just recording the little things that I got. That was a blast. I loved it.
Yeah, it's awesome. That's sweet. All right, well, we'll wrap up there, and I might get Anton on, who's composing the music, and he can talk a little bit about his work. But thanks for coming on the stream, and as I said, like, future dev streams could be a little bit more focused. So like when we do one that focuses a bit more on audio and stuff, then we can chat a bit more about what's going on. But it's been great to be able to introduce you on today's stream as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. Alright, now Anton. We're going to get Anton in here. If I can find the right button. Anton, where have you gone? Come back. There he is. Hey,
Hello there. How's it
welcome.
going?
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, I'm
How are you
gonna
finding
mute
the
it.
stream?
Good. I need to mute it though now so I can hear you in real time.
That's my poor man's echo effect.
Yeah. Echo. Um,
So
all right.
yeah,
Yes.
I feel like with this project that music has. I mean, I certainly don't want to belittle other projects in any way. Music is an incredibly important part of a lot of games, but I feel that it's something that will make or break the sense of mood and atmosphere that we're trying to convey with parts of the game. So like I'm really excited to have you on board for the stuff that you've done so far. What are your thoughts about what you've had from playing the builds that you've checked out so far?
Um, well, there's sort of like two areas, I guess, of music that make sense in a game like this. One is the diegetic music, or the music in the game. You know, something that's happening. If you're wandering through a town and you come upon a person and they're playing a lute, you know, we should
Yeah.
have some lute music to help you identify that location. And in some ways, that almost behaves in the world the same way as sound effects. Doesn't necessarily have to, but it certainly gives you sort of that immersiveness in a location,
Yeah.
versus sort of what I would consider the score, which is primarily what I've worked on at this point. So, again, without visuals, we get to let our minds imagine everything, but having an emotional propellant certainly helps.
Yeah. And this comes back to I was talking earlier about not wanting narration because it can bring in performance. Part of that is that
Right.
I want to make sure that the music has the opportunity to provide a performance, and that the sound, like the ambient sound design for environmental effects, has the opportunity to provide performance as well.
Hmm. Yeah, so I totally agree with that, and I think what's interesting is that when perception of audio, perception of music, and how it affects people it varies a lot. And so
Yeah.
I think that's especially when it's music on its own, I feel like there's a risk of letting it get out of hand. So I don't know, that's you and I have already had that that conversation once, where there was something that I felt like it was mysterious or peaceful walking through a forest, and you felt it was a little more tense than that. And
Yeah.
I didn't tell my girlfriend what I wrote for you or what I was working on at the time, but she walked in, she was like, "Oh, this is so peaceful, like walking through a forest." And she literally had no idea what I was doing, what I was working on. She just came in and that was her first reaction. So
Yeah.
it makes it a tricky topic, and one that I'm excited about, especially as we sort of figure out when and where score can really impact the game the most. I think a lot of it can come from the sound design, and so having the musical elements to really push certain areas, I think, will really make them powerful.
Like something I
So-
kind of wanted to do as well is and same with Jasmine's work, is that there's an opportunity for her interpretation of the scene briefs that we've got, to use that to inform the presentation of the story. And same with your work. Like if you come up with this kind of interpretation, musical interpretation of a scene, and it kind of feels like it shows something in a different light, then that might feel like it fits better with the game as a whole. So there's an opportunity for music to inform the rest of the content as well, which is really neat. I don't know if that really happens with other types of games.
That's one of those weird things where a lot of times composers will get hired really early in a project, but then not actually work until the very end of a project. So I definitely have heard of other people who wrote music for a game. They wrote some main themes early on. Those are used as inspiration for concept art and for actually developing the game. And then once there's a narrative, they came back and sort of elaborated on the ideas that they wrote sort of early on in the project. So it's always some give and take, you know?
Yeah, no, it's cool. I guess like with things that have voice acting as well, like often voice actors' performance will inform like 3D animation or something sometimes as well.
Sure. But if they don't know what if they also get the opportunity to understand what their character looks like,
right,
that may give them a direction for their voice. So it's
a bit chicken and egg sometimes as well. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I was gonna play the two pieces of music that we've gotten so far, and I was gonna ask if you wanted to sort of comment on them when they were done. So you happy to do that?
Sure.
Yeah,
that sounds good.
Well, let's go with this one. This is the opening theme, and just to give a bit of context for people checking out the stream, this is the point at which the player is walking through the snowy mountain pass. There's a thunderstorm that's about to happen. During the course of the piece of music, they get caught in the avalanche and pass out. So that was the first piece that we kind of, or I guess you worked on. I didn't really do much aside from go, I like this bit. I'm not sure about this bit. I think I'm still blown away. We worked together before on another project, and I remember that was a really fun experience, and I really loved the stuff that we came up with for that, or again that you came up with for that, because all I did was go, yeah, I like this bit. This is really cool. Like it really adds a whole nother level to the text that I put together. I just wrote some text and had no real sense of where it would go, and I was like, I didn't really give you much in the way of direction, did I?
No.
To start with, I just gave you the text.
Not too much. You just gave me the text,
right?
And you said that it was going to be scrolling.
Yeah.
And so,
that puts a time constraint on.
Right. I do a lot of like film scoring, and then obviously this is a cut scene in the game type of thing. And so the first thing I did, I actually went in and I put in markers basically everywhere that I wanted something to happen. I did it several times. I read it and I tried to read as if I didn't know what was coming on, and then put markers where it felt like an event would happen, which is difficult because everyone reads at a different pace. So it's going to be tricky to understand exactly how the music will line up in this particular scenario. We don't have the sort of advantage of really specific cue points. So when I first read your description, it reminded me a lot of the music by Modest Mussorgsky called "Pictures at an Exhibition," and he also wrote this piece, "Night on Bald Mountain" or "Night on Bear Mountain," and basically, the idea of those were he went to this exhibition, he saw these pictures, and he went home and he wrote a whole bunch of music about what he thought was happening in those moments. And for some reason, it really kind of spoke to me that we would play music in a similar vein, sort of orchestral, kind of romantic period style, things like that. So, it was, I don't know. I found it a really refreshing way to work. Just the images in my head and the story in my head based on what you saw. So,
yeah, I don't know. I really was, like I said, I was blown away when the first sketch came through, and there were a couple of bits where I was like, maybe this feels, at the time it felt a little bit too bouncy, maybe a little bit too comical, but this one still feels like it's, I don't know how to explain it. It feels like something big is going on. It feels like it's still kind of lighthearted but not silly.
Right.
That's the sense that I get.
Yeah.
From it. And I appreciate that. That's really cool.
Cool. I know you also had thought at one point you were worried that the dynamic fluctuations, because there's some hits early on, and you were like, oh, these seem kind of big. Maybe they're too loud. And, where can we go from there? And then we go to a much bigger place. And it sort of changes, everyone's perception. It's interesting how something that can happen later in time
can change the way you see something in the past. Definitely.
Exactly. And even when you first think something, it's amazing, really, to me, how much time can change anything. So, but listening to it now, I think there's a lot of things still that need to be cleaned up on that one.
It's definitely definitely appropriate for where the project is at the moment. So it's good to have something like that we can toss into the game. I still need to get the text scrolling stuff happening so that cutscenes can be in the builds properly rather than in the prototypes.
Right.
So it's not in the current build, but I'm definitely looking forward to being able to kind of open up the game and be presented with that as sort of the first experience, I guess, that you have when you launch it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna be cool.
I agree.
So I might, if you've still got time, I might throw the other piece up and we have a listen to that one.
Sure, let's do that.
Alrighty, so this is a piece that we were talking about just earlier, which you composed for the kind of couple of the forest locations that we've got.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so like this is sort of your interpretation of the notion of this sort of peaceful, serene forest. And the moment I heard it, I was like, wow, this feels a little bit sad.
Mm-hmm.
And my immediate thought was, this would be really cool for the goblin stuff, because I want to present the goblins as this kind of oppressed people, I guess. Like they've got this civilization, but they're kind of having to live in a situation that's not ideal for them. And part of that is stuff that you get embroiled in. I was like, maybe this is a good fit for them, and that was like, that was my first thought. And it's kind of interesting to kind of go, that there are all these kind of, again, possibility space that we can explore and different things that we can try. For me, when I think about the forest, I'm like, that it's excitement and exploration and adventure are sort of the things that that I think of when I think of the forest and stuff, and that's probably because of the Quest for Glory influences. Like, you step out of the gates and it plays this piece of music, and you're like, oh my god, adventure! But at the same time, it really does have like this serene thing, and that was something that never occurred to me, to kind of think of the forest in that way. Or maybe like there's some ruins in the forest could work with those as well. Like, but yeah, that's what we were talking about before, is like different interpretations of different stuff. I'm not against the idea of the forest being more peaceful and more serene like that. It's just sort of not what my immediate expectations were, and it's kind of awesome as sort of a content creator, as a developer, to hear something that challenges the expectations that you might have already had about the work that you've created.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, when I wrote it, sort of my intention was that there's really kind of three parts to this. There's the main flute, which actually plays the same melody the entire time, with very little concern really to what's going on around it. So, the way I felt it is, when I go into the woods, if I take a flute with me, I'm just playing some music, the world kind of revolves around me, or, I feel like the world is revolving around me, and I'm just doing my thing, and I don't have to actively participate with the rest of the world. And then and then sort of behind that are these strings that start off really minimal, and then as you sort of go through the piece and it sort of explores, they get bigger and
like
fuller.
The way they swell,
Yeah, exactly. So by the end of the piece, it feels like you've maybe gone into a new area, I don't know, to a new place, and it sort of happened around you while you were just listening to your simple melody. Everything happened around you, and suddenly you're in this new explored territory. So that's definitely kind of the way I felt as I was writing it. And I guess my idea of the mountains, and because I grew up, I don't know how well you know the geography of the U.S., but I grew up in Colorado, which is kind of it's the Old West, and it was where they suddenly came across the whole western side of the United States, and there are just mountains everywhere. So I grew up, and it's very flat until you suddenly reach these towering mountains on top of you. And that's where I grew up, is in this kind of right at the base of the mountains. And so I would spend a lot of time in the mountains, and what I would always enjoy was just getting away from the hustle and bustle of small city life, to just getting to outdoors and relaxing. So that is why I think of the outdoors that way. So
yeah, well, like I said, it's really cool to have different perspectives, and like other contributions. This was like the most exciting thing for me about having you on board was the opportunity to kind of as I said, have the music have the opportunity to inform the rest of the the text and the presentation and stuff. And so like the ability to have you contribute like atmosphere and mood and stuff, that's really cool. So yeah, like really definitely appreciating having those different kinds of perspectives and different angles towards things. It's really cool.
Right. Yeah. And I'm excited to try some more ideas as we move forward, So
yeah.
Very cool. And to answer the question in the chat, I mean, I always like being able to release a soundtrack. Even on games where there's not enough music to make a soundtrack, I still like to make it available for people if they're interested.
Yeah, I'd love to see a soundtrack for this. I feel like because the music is going to be playing such a significant part in creating the experience that players will find memorable. I feel like a soundtrack would be a really good companion for the game.
Yeah, I think it could be. That it's weird. I mean, I feel like because this game is so narrative driven that if we were to release a soundtrack, it would either have to retell the same story or tell something completely different, because it has the potential to to need to follow the story.
Yeah.
I was just listening to an interview with the guy who composed the music for Ori. I don't know if you've seen that game. Ori and the something. I'm really bad with proper nouns. Anyway, he was talking about how he put together
Ori in the Blind Forest,
a CD.
Is that it?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, that's it. Which it has a beautiful soundtrack. It really is a beautiful soundtrack. But he was talking about how he threw away almost like 50 minutes of music.
Wow.
For the soundtrack, not for the game, of music that was in the game that he felt didn't really help tell the story arc the way he wanted to in the on the CD release. And so it's interesting, but I suggest going and listening to that soundtrack, as it's a great
I'm
a great soundtrack.
I really like the notion of like being able to tell the story of this game, or being able to use the soundtrack to tell its own narrative. I think that's really sweet. That's really cool. Cool idea.
Yeah.
But if it resulted in that kind of stuff being cut, it would be nice to release some kind of ancillary thing that that gave people who just wanted to hear everything from the game the opportunity to check that stuff out as well.
Right. He did have a response to that type of question, which is
Play
that
the game.
It's well, no, that enough of the thematic music was used in other cues, meaning some of it would have felt like it was repetitious to hear it in these other formats, but that he wasn't against the idea of releasing it sort of for the completist, and all of this. I think the soundtrack is still an hour, so
Wow.
it's not. It's a big game. I mean, and it's very music driven. So,
I'll have to check that out.
yeah.
Sounds exciting.
To contrast that, I mean, so that's maybe 2 hours of music. I think we were talking before briefly about one of the Star Wars games that I worked on, and we did 5 hours of new music for that.
Wow.
And
we did
they
what,
still
6 for flat, and most of it was the same thing with more pieces.
Yeah, I think Flat's score ultimately comes out to about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah. But I loved the way that Flat worked. The game was fun, and I liked the way you guys implemented the music in it. So
Yeah, I really I really enjoyed that we were able to put it together the way that we did, and that because your stuff came in after we finished 7-Day FPS. We kind of development had mostly wrapped up, and it was something that we knew that we wanted to have. But I think you were busy at the time because you were doing the Wolfire one at the same time, were you?
Yeah, that was the year we did Receiver. I think at the same time.
Wow, you were busy.
I know what happens. No, yeah, it was. That was a good game jam.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff came out of that. I feel kind of disappointed by this year's because I just didn't manage to get anything off the ground. Winter's Wake ended up being a bigger project than I thought. I ended up having to do more work than I was anticipating, and so I couldn't get anything playable within the week, and that made me sad. But I feel like this is going to be an interesting project in its own right as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, from that same, not from this last year's, but from that same game jam with Receiver and Flat was also that other
Superhot
big
came out of that as well, I think. Was it that year?
Maybe. But then also there's that it's another multiplayer FPS that has been developed pretty far now. Why can't I think of it? Oh well.
The only things that spring to my mind are like probably archery and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, all this stuff came out of 7-Day FPS. It's amazing to see, because 7-Day FPS is sort of a larger scale game jam, but it's got no constraints. Like it's got no rules. It's all freeform compared to other stuff that I've seen as well. So it's kind of, I find it really interesting. And it's really cool to see neat stuff come out of it.
Yeah, for sure. I love seeing things come out of a game jam. I think it's a great thing. So, and it shows that they're valuable assets for everyone involved.
Yeah, definitely. It kind of says that there's if you're happy to kind of, because everybody treats, or a lot of people treat game jams as the opportunity to do something that they wouldn't normally do. They like have the opportunity to throw away commitments or embrace failure if failure happens, and that's where interesting and exciting creative stuff happens, I think. You sort of open up doors that you would otherwise keep closed.
Right. So, yeah, I think they do exactly what they're supposed to do. So, and a week seems like the perfect amount of time. Honestly.
Yeah.
So.
It's cool because it's long enough that you don't have to burn yourself out. You can go to sleep. Like it's not 48 hours,
Right.
But it's also long enough that if you want to do something big and you do want to kind of push yourself really, really hard, there's scope to create something of scale. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I like with Flat, I created all of the assets within the week and did, I don't know, maybe 20% of the code. And it was like, I think I slept a little bit less than everyone else, but I still felt moderately rested by the end.
Right.
And same with dance. I did everything except the music on my own, and was able to kind of create something that was, I again don't feel like I quite got everything I wanted to do, but that's the whole thing. Like even with Flat, there was stuff that we wanted to do that we couldn't do, and I'm sure that with Receiver, because David went back and did a whole bunch of stuff before the Steam release as well, if I remember correctly.
Just one patch that I know of, maybe two, maybe one patch, and then like a quick hot fix.
A little bit later, yeah. But were there feature changes for the Steam release? I can't remember.
Not for the Steam release, no.
Oh, okay. All right, well, that's cool. But yeah, you guys did really well with that. NMB says that there was an extra gun added.
Right, that was in the one update that was added. Yeah. So I think there was just the one major release. So it was cool. I'm really happy with how that music turned out, that game, and even I mean, it led to other projects as well. So
Yeah.
I was definitely happy overall with that one.
That's awesome. I think one of my favorite aspects is the movement mechanic for running.
Oh,
People hate it, but I love that it's exploring something that we don't think about. Like, when we play games, shift, that's it. You hold down shift and you're running. It's not exertion, it's not tiring. The idea of saying, how can we make running require effort? I think that's really cool to explore.
right. And not only that, but like running is often such a bad idea in that game anyway.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it's a nice way to
but
kind of
it was-
enforce a slower pace as well.
yeah,
Add risk to
it
running.
was. What was it? I mean, it makes you feel so much more panicked in the moments that you need to panic.
Yeah, definitely.
When-
Definitely.
If you're trying to run and you're trying to also remember to sit there and tap. So
Yeah,
it's
it's
insane.
great. Almost 3 hours. All right. So on that note, was there anything else about Winter's Wake that that
Oh, is
you
that what
wanted
we're
to
talking
say?
about?
I think so.
Um,
I don't remember.
No, I mean, I think that we have an interesting broad scope of where we can go with it, based on just those two pieces, and then we'll go from there, and we'll find some amazing places, I think, to continue. I think that there'll be a good collaboration.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing where we're able to take stuff. It definitely brings a lot of character that the game just wouldn't have otherwise. And it's like the positional audio. You're like, until the game had sounds like that in it, nobody really thought that it needed to be there. As soon as people heard it, they're like, "Wow, it's amazing! Finally, it's a full thing." I feel like the music has the same thing. Like if you don't think about the fact that it's going to have music, you go, "Oh, okay, whatever." But then you put that stuff in, and suddenly it's just got so much more presence.
Yeah, it's that's why I do this as my job. I gotta say,
It's awesome. All right, well, thank you.
it was not by mistake.
Thank you so much for joining me for the stream. It's really great to be able to introduce you and Lumi during the first dev stream. Like I said before, it'd be nice to come back at some point later when when I do a stream that's focusing more specifically on music, and we can maybe work through another couple of pieces depending upon where we're at and how much stuff we've got done, or brainstorm some stuff or whatever. But it'd be cool to get you back at some point if we're able, and I'll be able to give you more notice next time.
Oh, that'd be great. And thanks for having me. It was good chatting with you guys.
Yeah, as always, it's a pleasure. Cheers.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Wow. So, just to recap, we had Jasmine Serrano join us. She's going to be doing Foley and sound production for the environmental audio. And I was also just talking with Anton Riehl, who is doing the music composition. And I saw in chat that people are very impressed by what they heard, which is good, because it matches how impressed I was. So, just to give you an idea of, because this is meant to be a development stream, and I'm meant to be talking about developing the game, so rather than just talking about ideas and concepts and stuff, here's the stuff that I'm working on at the moment. Nailing down the state manager, which I mentioned is still undergoing a bit of refactoring to make sure that it does everything we need to do. I'm expanding input support, which is something that I've thrown Henry onto, who I mentioned was doing some additional programming. So he's working on making sure the gamepad input works properly and that sort of stuff. We're going to be, as soon as the state manager is ready to robustly take the Act 1 puzzle set, we'll be implementing those into the game. When Jasmine has the stuff from the March recording session in the Sequoias that we mentioned earlier, when there's audio from that's ready to go in, we'll be implementing that and seeing how that fits and feels in the game. And then from there, we will be having a demo of Act 1, which people will be able to download and check out themselves, and get a first-hand experience of what the game is about and what the game is going to be. So on that note, thank you everybody for watching. I hope that this has been interesting, at least. I am by no means an expert game developer. I've been sharing my thoughts and opinions and perspectives on things that I'm working on. I'm learning as I go, like I've never made an adventure game before. I've never done puzzle game design before. And I feel like there's some value in being able to share those learning experiences that I have and share them as I have them. So this first stream kind of serves as the base. This is where everything is at, and then the stuff that we talk about from here is going to be a more focused looks at the things that happen during development. So I might do a code walkthrough at some point. I might talk about maybe we decide that the input manager is completely inappropriate and we have to change it. I would go through and I would talk about why we had to change it and what we learned from what we had to begin with. So be able to talk about that sort of stuff there as well. As we get more content, more music, and more audio, we'll be able to talk about those as well. So if anybody wants to know more, there's also a concept introduction and a gameplay video at winterswake.com. And if you're excited about the idea of supporting development and helping me focus more time on development, you can visit patreon.com/Cheeseness and pledge support there. That also gets you access to a few little bits and pieces. And also supports me in some of the writing that I do about games and game development. On that note, stickied in the Hitbox chat here is a URL for a questionnaire on a game called Another World that I'm running at the moment, which will close on April the 25th. I'm expecting that that's probably not going to get published until the end of June, because there's a lot of reading and analysing of the research that I've been gathering. But if you've heard of or played that game, or you know anybody who has played that game, certainly consider sharing your thoughts. It's not often that you get an opportunity to write about the impact that such an influential game has had on players. It's not an experience that I've had before, but I'm very much looking forward to divining what I can from the responses I've gotten. But yeah, so were there any questions from chat that I may have missed, or any discussion points that you'd like to bring up before I draw this excessively long stream to a close? I will also be making this available on YouTube, I think, and we'll be making the slideshow available, and also some of those images and bits of concept art to my Patreon supporters. So I see some questions about the name Winter's Wake. So the thing that I wanted to call it originally was in the snowy winter's wake. So you're like, it takes place at the onset of spring, where life is returning, but things are still cold and a little bit harsh, and also you're still snowed in and stuck in this this mountain pass location. But Anton suggested that might be a bit verbose, and that Winter's Wake would be more fitting, and it feels like it fits. It's certainly easier to type, and I think maybe it's a little bit more recognizable. But yeah, so that's what the name's all about. Yeah, it's all Anton's fault. But yeah, so on that note, I don't see any more questions coming through. I might wrap things up. Thank you again, everybody, for joining me. It's been a pleasure to entertain you and waffle on about the stuff that I've been investing my time in. It's really cool to see that people care. So thank you again. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.